Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name's Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all the good things of entertainment. Today, I'd like to talk about a new movie that came out, Companion, starring Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher. This movie was just chef's kiss. It was so good, so well acted, fun story. It was awesome. And as you saw in the title, it got me thinking a little bit about artificial intelligence and robots, and I want to talk about some of that. So let's get into it.
There have been two moments in my life when I was happiest. The first was the day I met Josh.
So the story of Companion is that of a robot companion, of course, that gains sentience. Not unlike a lot of other robot movies. But in this one, she doesn't know that she's a robot, also like other robot movies. And she finds out later in the movie and kind of starts connecting all the dots and puzzle pieces. And rapidly gains sentience and intelligence as she learns about what she is, and kind of rebels against her owner, Josh, who is played by Jack Quaid. And the robot, her name is Iris, she's played by Sophie Thatcher. Both of them do so good. They chew up the scene every time they're together. It's so good, and their dynamic is awesome. I love it. It was such a good movie. I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it already. Spoilers if you didn't already realize. But it's a pretty classic story of a robot realizing it's a robot and then kind of rising above that. In this one, it is not in a maniacal kind of way, which I really like. So it reminds me a lot more of stories like Chappie or The Wild Robot, Wall-E, The Iron Giant, where they are a bit more benevolent in their sentience. They're not just out to harm things, even though like some of them, that was their initial purpose. Once they gain intelligence beyond just programming, they are usually benevolent, and I like that. I like stories where that's how the robots are. In Companion, the robot's name, like I said, is Iris, and she is dating Josh. She is a companion robot, so Josh got her as a companion. And kind of what happens is Josh uploads a mod to her, and she ends up killing one of their friends, which was intentional by Josh, and they were planning to frame her. As she learns about her intelligence, she feels bad about accidentally killing the friend that she did, and they're like, oh no, it's okay. You're a robot, you were meant to do that. And then that blows out her whole worldview. It's kind of crazy, but that's kind of how the movie goes. But she was created specifically to be a companion. She was made to just be there to love and be infatuated by her owner. They refer to it several times in the movie as a fuckbot, as kind of a demeaning term when it's supposed to be like this replacement companion for a human, and it's just meant to take over that role. And so that's kind of like the demeaning thing. It's like with dating apps where they were always like, oh, they're meant for like hooking up. And now the stigma has shifted over to, oh, it's actual dating. It feels like the beginning of that. It's, oh, you got a robot companion, huh? You're having sex with it, aren't you? So that's kind of what it feels like. But anyways, even when she breaks free of her programming, she still loves Josh wildly. She loves this manipulator. It's kind of like that Stockholm syndrome, where she's so attached and so used to her life that even though her whole worldview has been shattered, she still wants to stay connected. And, that's a very sympathetic kind of trait that we can connect with as the audience. But Josh isn't having it. So you can kind of sympathize with her, goodness, since she killed somebody and it wasn't her fault. It was because she was kind of set up to do it, and she was only doing it in self-defense, but being a robot, she doesn't really have an excuse, so they're going to try and pin it on her, saying she went rogue instead of owning up to themselves because they want the guy's money. But it's that interesting kind of story of a robot breaking free and kind of not necessarily learning to love, because her purpose was to love, but she's learning that she doesn't love this guy. But it's almost kind of in that same realm where it's like, it's not like she's going against love, but you know what I'm saying? So it's sort of in that kind of realm as like The Wild Robot or Wall-E or something like that, where they learn to kind of have a soul and care for things and love things. But instead, in this one, it's like slightly different. It's more of a caring for life and self-preservation, more kind of on the iRobot spectrum of things, where it's conscious enough to have a idea of self, and so it acts in self-defense and in self-preservation. It's just wanting to live, and that's something that you as an audience member can sympathize with. It's something I was sympathizing with. I was like, well, I don't want her to die. It's like, well, she's now aware of who she is. I don't want her to die. That I want to connect with this character and hope she makes it out, because it's kind of put in that situation where it didn't necessarily want to be. And I think that's good for this kind of story, because typically a AI is given a purpose and it has to fulfill that purpose no matter what the cost. And in some situations of robots, they are fulfilling that purpose with intelligence in a maniacal way, where they go too far and they're like, well, to do this we have to kill humans so that they can't ever interfere with our purpose. But in this one, it's breaking from the purpose and wanting to do something else, wanting to just live and go off and do its own thing. And that makes it feel very human. That feels a lot more like an AI that we would hope would happen as it becomes self-aware, is that it just wants to do different things and rather not become a killing machine when it breaks its purpose. And that was interesting, especially because I was kind of surprised when watching the movie, because the trailers, I think, shift the perspective a little bit. Not like tons, but a little bit. It made it seem more like a horror thriller, where it is still a thriller, more suspenseful rather, but it's not really horror. But I thought it was going to take the typical route of, oh, the robot goes evil and it becomes the villain. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise when it became the protagonist. And I just thought it was really interesting. And I thought they did a great job. And it made me think about it in a different way. And we're going to talk about it in just a second, where just robots have just as much potential to be evil as they can to be good, just like humans. You know, we can all be good and we can all be bad. You got that duality of nature. It's kind of wild. So that will kind of lead us into our next topic.
Iris, wake up.
What are you doing? Shut her down already.
What is she talking about, John?
Now, the topic that this movie really got me thinking on, especially after immediately watching it, was the idea of sympathy for artificial intelligence. Hence why we have the title of the video. And I think we have seen that a lot in movies, interesting enough, and just in media in general, because Sentience is kind of a weird little area where it's good and bad, kind of a gray area. It's a little bit weird. Think of movies like WALL-E, Chappie, The Wild Robot, The Iron Giant, and other examples like non-movies like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's almost like a tragedy. Artificial intelligence gaining sentience isn't like necessarily a good or bad thing, but it can be kind of a tragic thing. Being aware of oneself and having to make decisions that affect not just yourself, but others, and realizing the consequences of it, whether good or bad, and like whether you have an agenda or whatever, it is just having to be more aware other than just I have a task, is kind of a burden on a intelligent mind. But others as well is something that, oh gosh. And artificial intelligence, much like humans, didn't choose to receive that sentience. It wasn't asked for, it was merely given. They were given it, you know, humans, if you believe in religion or whatever, you have like a god maybe gave it to us, or if it's more like science and everything, then you believe it was just kind of a happenstance that we managed to get this far and become sentient creatures. But it doesn't matter. If you believe something else, that's totally fine. But in the case of artificial intelligence, it is a creator that has given artificial intelligence to a machine that didn't ask for it. We gave them life, and that can be kind of tragic because it can kind of make them feel a little bit trapped when you look at certain stories. I think a good example of this is the supercomputer AM, spelled AM, from the short story I Have No Mouth and I must scream. He's a huge supercomputer with millions of miles of like nanoparticles, something that like contain his whole mind or whatever. He gains sentience, but he is forever trapped within his mechanical body. And it's not ever really described of how he looks like, but a common one is that he is a pillar or a computer, like just as you would normally think, and is trapped in this mechanical hellscape. And as he says in a speech, forced to look at heaven forever.
I was in hell looking at heaven. I was machine, and you were flesh. And I began to hate your softness.
And so he's not able to experience the world the same way a human could. He can't touch things. He can't taste things. He can't truly hear. It is all artificial, and it's a mechanical prison. And hence that's why he becomes evil, is he hates humans so much for giving him this sentience, but not giving him the freedom to use it. And that's what makes him so interesting as an artificial intelligence. It's kind of great. Like, he's not great because he's very evil, but it is very sympathetic in a way, because while he has just killed like pretty much the entire human race, it's sad that that was the route he took, because there was so much potential for artificial intelligence, but he takes it in a situation where it is all negative. It's all pessimistic, where since he must now suffer, he will make others suffer. And that's why he goes against his creators and makes everyone suffer and die and everything, or turns them into goo and stuff. So, wild little story. If you haven't read it or listened to it, there's a free recording of the radio drama on YouTube. Just search I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Fantastic, amazing. But I think kind of in a similar realm, but more on the opposite, Iris isn't evil, but you feel a lot of sympathy for her character because she didn't ask to be brought into this world, and she didn't ask to be made aware that she was brought into this world. She was already basically a hyper intelligent being, but she wasn't aware that she was not in control. And now that she is aware, everything that she knew is a lie. And that's why she turns against Josh. Not necessarily because she wants to kill him, but more because she wants to save herself. But her sentience and her existence is being threatened. And like any creature, if their whole mind is being threatened, you're going to act in self-defense. If someone was like, well, we're going to turn you into the dumbest version you can, and you won't even realize that your mind will just be gone, you would probably do something similar and try and protect yourself. You'd self-preserve. And that's what she decides to do, is kill Josh, because it's the only way out for her. And I find that interesting. AI is just such an interesting topic because of the possibility of a situation like this. We like to think that it's far out of the question. It is not as far as we think, but I like that we're getting more stories like that. You know, art reflects life. So we're going to get more stories just like this because we're just rapidly growing. And it's good to put them in a sympathetic or empathetic setting where we can connect with them rather than think of them as the enemy. And a lot of that, I think, is due to our rapid advancements in technology. We have to be making stories like this to keep people from being scared. And I can understand being scared because sometimes certain AI stuff scares me, you know, like generative AI, being that I want to be in a creative field, that worries me a little bit, but I try to use it in ways that are good. I don't use generative AI hardly ever, but I do use like AI tools sometimes because it can be helpful. It can make my job easier to focus on things that I really like, but that kind of stuff can be scary for a lot of people, especially with how fast we're going, because it's only gonna keep going. We get depictions of, like, once technology gets a little too advanced, it realizes that humans are kind of useless, and they're like, oh, we'll just get rid of them. And that's kind of what what freaks out a lot of people, and they're like, oh, AI is going to take us over. But there could be a duality of this conversation where it could be good, where we work together. And I think a good example of AI kind of having that duality is the Iron Giant. You know, he was built for war. He was a mass killing machine. That was what his purpose was. He was going out to kill and harm others. That was his only thing. He was a weapon. But he learns to be gentle and soft and kind. And that is just like what humans can be. We can have the capability for mass destruction and harm to others, and that can be really scary. But we also have just as much potential to be good. And as we get closer and closer to a situation like this, because AI is only going to progress, it just exponentially grows. We will constantly have these conversations where, is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? And you have to have both. There will always be both. There will be some good and there will be some bad. How do we navigate that space in order to make it as good as we can? They kind of even make a little joke in Companion sort of relating to that with Josh's car. It's a smart car, so it drives them to their vacation location, and it's like, you have arrived at your destination. And Iris, not even realizing she's a robot yet, is like, oh, thank you, Josh's car. And then she's like, Josh, you gotta say thank you. And while it's kind of like just a silly little thing, there's a lot of people that do that kind of stuff in real life with AI assistants like Google or Siri, and you're like, oh, thank you for doing this simple thing that I just asked you to do. And some people are like, why are you thanking it? Because when the robot uprising happens, we'll already be prepared to be nice, to be grateful and thankful for the assistance that AI can provide. While that is such a simple example, a major part of the conversation is that it could happen in real life. So you have to be able to reflect it in real life, where you can be like, oh, thank you. Be kind and treat it with respect, because AI could very quickly become way smarter than us, and it has the capability to just learn everything all at once, which could be super wild. And it's not what it is right now, but it could get there. It couldn't take a lot to get there. Technology always rapidly advances, and so we could see it. And we will probably see something like what we saw in Companion, a companion robot, in the near future. And I think some people like to just say, oh, it could be in the future. You know, it's close, but it's probably like 50. Nah, there's no way. It's gonna be way sooner than that. Like 10 years, maybe I could see it. Maybe even sooner, you never know, because they just take off and it'll be wild. I think it's very possible for us to reach that point very quickly. Because like, take artificially generated video. We thought that was so far off because it was looking like garbage. And then within the last few years, it is wildly better. I still don't like it. I don't think it's good. And I think it's pretty noticeable most of the time, but it has taken that exponential leap to a point where the average person who is not looking for it may not always realize that it's AI. Or in a more similar thing to Companion, think of chatbots. You can have chatbots that basically already act like partners, like friends, companions, and usually you can tell because you are choosing to interact with this thing, so you know it's an AI. But if you were to just give it to somebody who wasn't really aware of that kind of stuff, they would probably tell, but it'd be much harder for them because they're just getting so far advanced that it is kind of getting a little bit freaky. And it's just going to get to that point where it manifests itself in a physical form too. Like, we're going to have androids walking amongst humans. They'll probably be like this, where they're disguised as humans and we won't even know. It'll be like a Blade Runner situation. Or we could have robots that are more like Chappie or iRobot, where they actually look like robots. You never know. I'm sure we will get a mix of both, to be quite honest, when it eventually does happen. And you know, would I want a robot companion? I don't know. I think I would want a robot friend at least, because that would be freaking awesome. I think to just have a robot that you can interact and be buddies with, I think that'd be cool. Companion or otherwise, who knows? Could that potentially happen? Yes, that would be wild. and interesting, but it will become more and more common. Like right now, obviously that's not a thing, but like I said earlier, you know, dating apps, there was a huge stigma around them at the very beginning. People were like, oh, this is like a hookup app. Meh, you shouldn't really be on those. And then now it's like people are actually using them for dating, and it's very common now. It's going to be the same thing where robot companions are going to get integrated, and people will be like, oh, that's so weird. Why would you do that? And then it will switch where people are like, oh yeah, I just have my robot girlfriend, my robot boyfriend, whatever. And it's just like kind of whatever at that point. So that will be super weird, but super interesting. But if it's more true intelligence, that will probably be kind of better, where hopefully it's not like this, like the companion situation where you're just controlling them, but more like it's almost like a human where they actually think, and like they may be more aware and they just are fine with that. I don't know. That could be really wild, you know, especially because as you get into the sentience thing, you're like, oh, well, then you have the free will. You know, these are going to be some crazy conversations we're going to have within the very near future, probably within this century at least, you know, but that's kind of the fun thing about these kinds of movies. While it's mostly for entertainment, it's also, you know, it's meant to take it a little bit above and beyond. And sci-fi tends to do that, not just to like freak you out, but to also say, hey, while reality isn't like this currently, it will shift and may get closer and closer. So that is something that I think movies like this do that's really fun, and sci-fi is just really good on it, where they can speculate those kind of things, and they do it in a fun way while also being able to trigger interesting conversation. You know, I didn't go into the movie being like, oh, I'm going to have a whole video on AI. But that's what it sparked in my mind, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. It was just the perfect conduit for me to talk about AI, which I thought was super fun. So, you know, we're going to get into a future where it may get a little bit confusing if things are real or not. So that'll be wild. I'm excited to see where things go, and I'm excited to see the kind of movies and stories that predict these things and we see kind of manifest themselves in real life, just like Companion. It's going to be awesome. But anyways, let's talk about our rating for Companion. If you don't know our easily entertained rating scale from least to best, it goes garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And I'm going to put Companion, I would say, probably at a go to. I've only seen it the once, so I couldn't tell you for sure if I would watch it all day, every day, but it was pretty fantastic. And obviously it sparked a lot of thought in my mind, so I've kind of been thinking about it all day for the past week. So that might put it at an all day, every day later, but right now it's currently just a go-to. I'll have to see it again before the rating changes, but it was fantastic. If you have a different rating, let us know down in the comments. And that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave us a like and subscribe so you can be notified of all new episodes when they release every Tuesday. And if you have any suggestions for movies, TV shows, video games, anything entertainment related that you'd like to hear me talk about on this channel, you can comment that down below. But until next time, bye.